If you've been keeping up with the English news lately, you probably know about the ongoing debt ceiling issue in the United States. It's a big deal and it affects all of us in one way or another, even here in Indonesia. Now just take a moment to think about it. As of today, the US government's debt stands at a staggering $31.4 trillion. To put into perspective, Indonesia's entire GDP for 2022 was around $1.1 trillion. That means the US national debt is well over 28 times larger than the entire economic output of Indonesia. So you might be wondering why the US government has accumulated such a large amount of debt, especially considering that the United States is the largest economy in the world. It's a valid question. The answer is quite simple, yet complex at the same time. Every year, the government needs to fund various programs and services such as defense, healthcare, social security, infrastructure, education, and more. And where does the government get the money to pay all of this? Well, it primarily comes from taxes, okay, with individual income taxes being the main source. However, when the tax revenues are not enough to cover all the expenses, the government turns to borrowing money, right? But here's the thing, they do not borrow money the same way we do when we take out a loan, right? Instead, they issue treasury securities like bonds. The US government says to investors, hey, you can buy these bonds and we'll pay you back in a certain number of years with a fixed interest rate. It's safe investment because we're the US, a stable and prosperous country. And because the US is seen as a reliable borrower with a strong economy and the US dollar being the global reserve currency, many investors are interested in buying these treasury bonds, right? Now here's an interesting thing. While you might think that most of the US debt is owned by foreign countries like China, that's not true. In reality, the majority of the debt is actually owned by Americans themselves. Yeah, that's right. The government owes money to its own citizens. But here's the thing that worries a lot of people. The US has reached its debt ceiling, which is the maximum amount of debt that the government is allowed to have. This happened in January 2023, and it means that the government cannot borrow any more money unless Congress passes a law to raise the debt ceiling. Now, you might wonder, what's the big deal, right? Can't they just raise the debt ceiling and keep on borrowing? Well, it's not as simple. Raising the debt ceiling is a temporary solution, right? It allows the government to keep functioning and paying its bills, but it doesn't address the underlying issue of why the debt keeps growing. Think about it in your own life. If you're constantly borrowing more and more money without a plan to pay it back, eventually it will catch up to you, right? And that's the concern with the US debt. If it continues to grow unchecked, it could have serious consequences for their economy and future. However, if the US were to default on its debt, meaning it cannot make the necessary repayments, investor confidence in the US would be severely undermined. The consequences would be significant, both domestically and globally. Financial markets worldwide would experience disruptions and instability. Furthermore, international trade would be affected because the US dollar serves as the world's reserve currency and is widely accepted in global trade. In other words, defaulting on US debt would have catastrophic consequences. Therefore, it is highly likely that Congress will pass legislation to raise the debt ceiling again. However, I believe the US government should consider reducing its spending so that borrowing money every year becomes less necessary, right? But it's actually a dilemma for politicians. Politicians, unlike business people, are very bad with money. If they propose to spend less money, people will not vote for them, right? So think about it as an individual. You wouldn't spend more than you earn, right? Spending more than you earn is simply stupid. But governments do it all too often.